What are these? Can you name that horror movie? If you guessed staked vampires, you'd be right. But these aren't movie props. They're real ancient skeletons recently discovered in Bulgaria that may rewrite history. Hi, everyone. I'm here to introduce you to this channel where we bring you the most exciting and important discoveries from the world of archaeology. Join us as we uncover lost civilizations, mysterious artifacts, and everything else in between. And if you love at least one of those things, then be sure to hit that subscribe button to join our ever-growing community. Today, we're going to be discussing some spooky stuff, namely vampires. You know, blood-sucking, coffin-dwelling, neck-biting creatures of the night. We've all heard about them around Halloween, but did you know that there's evidence of people actually believing they existed throughout history? In today's video, we're going to discuss the recent discovery of several vampire skeletons in the small Bulgarian town of Sozopol, and what their discovery means for our understanding of vampires and the spread of vampirism across Europe. So, where exactly are these supposed vampires from, and why do villagers believe they're still alive? The story begins in the small Bulgarian town of Sozopol. The town was originally founded in 610 AD on the Black Sea coast by Byzantine Greeks. It was named after Saint Sophia of the Second. Over the centuries, the town changed hands many times, being ruled by the Romans, Bulgarians, Ottomans, and finally coming under the control of modern Bulgaria in 1946. Throughout its long history, the town has been an important trading center, which is probably how it earned its rather unfortunate nickname, the Pearl of the Black Sea. That is because, according to legend, pirates once captured a Byzantine princess who was sailing through the area. They took her to a cave near Sozopol where they imprisoned her. When Saint Sophia of the Second learned of this, she sent her disciple, Saint Mary of Egypt, to save the girl. Mary prayed over the captive and, after becoming enraged, threw the pirates into the sea where they drowned. To commemorate the event, the town of Sozopol was later renamed to honor Saint Mary. It wasn't until much later that the town got its not-so-nice nickname. In the 1700s, the Ottoman Empire began to weaken. This allowed Russia to make incursions into the Balkans and push the Ottomans back. In 1769, the Russians besieged the town of Sozopol, killing many and burning it to the ground. The few survivors fled to nearby villages. During the siege, there was heavy fighting in the Church of St. Mary, which is where the town supposedly got its rather unpleasant nickname. According to legend, the Russian soldiers hacked the marble bust of Mary to pieces and tossed it into the sea. Later, during the Battle of Slivnitsa, the Ottomans managed to capture some of the Russian soldiers, including the man responsible for destroying the statue. The Ottomans tied him up and dragged him back to Sozopol. There, they pulled out his entrails and tossed them into the sea where the statue had been destroyed. Then, they put his body inside the hollowed-out statue and tossed it back into the sea. Some accounts claim that the body floated to the shore and a fisherman hauled it out. Others say the statue simply washed up on the beach and the townspeople found the body inside. Regardless, the man died a horrible and slow death, which made the locals call the place the grave of the vampire. Since then, stories have circulated about strange events occurring in and around Sozopol. Some locals claim to hear disembodied screams echoing across the water, especially on nights when the moon was full. Others reported seeing specters walking the shoreline or even disappearing into the sea only to reappear on the beach the next morning. Of course, it should come as no surprise that the locals started blaming vampires for these disturbances. So, are there actually vampires haunting the beaches of Sozopol? Not likely, but that doesn't mean that the town isn't haunted. For the past several decades, archaeologists have been excavating various sites around Sozopol, including medieval Christian cemeteries. At one of the cemeteries, archaeologists uncovered a number of skeletons that had been buried around 800 years ago. Most of the skeletons appeared normal, except for a few of them. 4 of the skeletons had been interred with objects lodged in their chests. 3 of the objects were wooden stakes, while the 4th was a metal stake. What's more, the skeleton showed signs of trauma consistent with being stabbed. Some had deep puncture wounds around their rib cage, while others had blade wounds across their arms and legs. Archaeologists think the individuals were attacked while they were sleeping and tried to defend themselves against whatever killed them. According to Professor Nikolai Kolev from the University of Sofia, who's been leading the excavations, this could point to a violent end to their lives. He also suggested that the injuries could have been inflicted post-mortem. However, this would suggest that the person was already dead when the stake was driven through their chest, which is contrary to the whole vampire legend. Still, he said that it's possible the two could be related. In addition to the stakes, one of the skeletons was also found with a brick in its mouth. Bricks were often placed in the mouths of the dead in order to prevent the body from rising. This practice was common in both Bulgaria and other parts of Europe during the Middle Ages. It was believed that driving a stake through the heart and placing a brick in the mouth would keep the vampire from rising. In total, 130 skeletons were found at the site, including the 4 that had been staked. All 4 of the staked skeletons were adult males, 3 of whom were buried with swords. Another interesting detail is that 2 of the men were buried with shackles on their wrists. One of the skeletons even had a lock still attached. Professor Kolev thinks it's possible that the men were slaves or prisoners who died trying to escape. According to archaeologist Vasilka Koseva, the team is still trying to piece together the story behind the skeletons, but it could take years before they get answers. Why? Because these skeletons didn't just show up in an archaeological dig. They were found in mass graves that had been desecrated by grave robbers. In fact, many of the bones found broken, which suggests that they were smashed in order to remove the valuables from the bodies. All 4 of the staked skeletons had valuable grave goods, which may explain why grave robbers targeted them specifically. Because of this, archaeologists were only able to identify 2 of the skeletons as male. DNA testing revealed that one of the men was between the ages of 25 and 35 when he died. The other was somewhere between 45 and 55. Unfortunately, the remains of the other 2 men were too badly damaged to determine anything about them. Based on their injuries, researchers think the men were killed around the same time, possibly during some kind of large-scale conflict, although nothing matches up with any recorded battles in the region. What's more, the team was only able to identify one of the weapons as a sword. While the other 2 weapons were identified as stakes, they weren't consistent with swords used during the Middle Ages. Instead, they were similar to pikes used by Ottoman soldiers, which makes it harder to date the burials. What's more, none of the bodies display any physical traits that would be consistent with the mythical vampire. As we mentioned, vampires were thought to bloat, rise from the dead, and drink the blood of family members. But these bodies show no such signs. In fact, based on the condition of the skeletons, they don't even appear to have risen from their graves at all. Despite this, Professor Kolev believes that there's still a connection between the burials and vampires, saying, "I think there is a link between these people and vampires. These are not classic vampires as they are presented in fiction and film, but they are buried with typical vampire trappings." What do you think? Do you believe in vampires? Let us know your thoughts, and be sure to check out our previous videos on vampires and other scary topics. And now for something completely different. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Where are you from? What do you like to do for fun? And what brings you to this channel? We'd love to hear all about it in the comments below. Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please remember to give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. Subscribe to our channel to join our growing community and be the first to learn about our new videos. And don't forget to visit our website to learn even more about archaeology and history. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time. In this video, we're going to talk about one of the most famous and yet cursed idols of all time. The idol that was so scary that even the priests were afraid of it. Its name was Tukuturi, and it was located on Easter Island. It is said that when the first Europeans arrived on Easter Island in the year 1722, they found a land full of giant stone statues with human faces. The natives called these statues moai, and they had been making them for centuries out of the island's sparse supply of volcanic rock. These moai were not just any old statues. They were representations of the islanders' ancestors who had died and become spirits. In fact, the islanders believed that each moai was possessed by the spirit of its ancestor, and they would often hold ceremonies to honor and appease those spirits. But one moai stood out among the rest. It was larger than the others, and its face was more detailed and lifelike. The islanders called this moai Tukuturi, and it was considered to be the most powerful and dangerous of all the idols on the island. There are many legends surrounding Tukuturi, but the most popular one tells of how the islanders tried to raise it from its pedestal only to have it destroyed by a storm. The story goes that long ago, the islanders decided that they wanted to move one of their sacred moai from its pedestal. They had never done this before, and they knew that it would be very difficult, but they were willing to risk it, because they believed that moving the moai would bring them good luck. So they gathered together and began to drag the moai away from its home. At first, everything was going well, and they were able to move the statue without any problems. But then, suddenly, a violent storm rolled in. The wind began to howl and the rain came down in torrents. The islanders struggled to keep hold of the statue as it was battered by the wind and the waves, but eventually they lost their grip and the moai fell to the ground. It was smashed into pieces and the storm continued to rage until it was completely destroyed. The islanders were devastated, but they were also terrified. They believed that the storm was a sign that the gods were angry with them, and they were afraid that the gods would punish them even further if they tried to move the moai again. So they left the pieces of Tukuturi where they lay and built a new pedestal to replace the one that it had been on. And that's when the really strange thing happened. The islanders soon realized that the pieces of the statue were not just lying there, they were watching them. It's like they had eyes in the back of their heads or something. And no matter where the islanders went, the pieces of the statue seemed to follow them. They were getting messages carved into trees and rocks. They were finding bones and other objects arranged in patterns that seemed to mock them. And, worst of all, they were hearing whispers in the wind that seemed to come from the statue itself. It was clear to the islanders that the spirit of Tukuturi was not happy with them. They had trespassed against the will of the gods, and now they were paying the price. The islanders were at their wits' end. They didn't know what to do to appease the spirit of the statue, and so they turned to their priests for help. The priests were wise men who were respected by the islanders, and they knew a lot about the history and culture of their people. They studied the stars and interpreted their messages, and they could heal the sick and protect the islanders from harm. But even the priests were afraid of Tukuturi. They had never seen anything like it before, and they didn't know how to deal with it. But after much deliberation, they came up with a plan. They would build a new statue to replace the one that had been destroyed, and they would make it even bigger and more detailed than Tukuturi had been. They hoped that this would satisfy the statue's spirit and bring peace to the island once again. The islanders gathered together and began to work on the new statue. They quarried the stone and shaped it with primitive tools, and they put all of their skill and effort into creating a masterpiece. After many months of hard work, the statue was finally finished. It was taller than any of the other statues on the island, and its face was so lifelike that it seemed to be breathing. The islanders were proud of their work, but they were also nervous about what would happen next. They had put everything they had into the statue, and now they had to hope that it would be enough to appease the spirit of Tukuturi. They took the statue to the same pedestal that Tukuturi had been on, and they placed it in the exact same position. Then they held a ceremony to honor the statue and to ask for its forgiveness. The ceremony lasted for days, and the islanders sang and danced and made offerings to the statue. They were desperate to make things right and to put an end to the curse that had fallen upon them. But as the ceremony was coming to an end, suddenly the wind began to pick up. The rain started to fall, and the islanders were forced to run for cover. As they watched in horror, the statue was toppled off its pedestal and smashed to pieces. Once again, the islanders had failed to honor the statue properly, and now they would have to suffer the consequences. Legend has it that the islanders were cursed to suffer from hunger and disease until they learned their lesson and stopped trying to move the statue. Some say that the curse lasted for many years, and it wasn't until the islanders made a great effort to understand and respect the statue that it was finally lifted. Others say that the curse is still going on today, and that the islanders are still suffering from the wrath of Tukuturi. Now, while this legend may seem like just another crazy tale from a far-off land, there's actually some truth to it. The Europeans who arrived on Easter Island in the 1700s did find a population of people who were living in poverty and sickness. And the statues they found were not just any old statues. They were actually representations of real people who had lived on the island many years ago. The Europeans didn't know this, of course, and they didn't understand the culture or history of the people they found there. They simply saw a bunch of weird statues and assumed that the islanders were crazy. But the truth is that the islanders were doing their best to survive. They had been through a lot of hardship, and they were hoping that the Europeans could help them. But instead of helping them, the Europeans took advantage of them. They forced the islanders to work for them, and they stole their food and their resources. They also brought diseases with them that the islanders had no immunity to, and many of them died as a result. However, despite all of this, the islanders still held on to their traditions and their beliefs. They continued to honor their ancestors and to tell their stories, even though the Europeans thought they were crazy. And even though they suffered greatly, they never gave up hope that one day things would get better. And that's the story of Tukuturi, the cursed idol that even the priests were afraid of. Do you believe in curses? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want to hear more stories like this one, be sure to subscribe for more content. Thanks for watching. Ancient Roman city of Herculaneum, now just a ruin near Naples in Italy. 2,000 years ago, it was home to around 5,000 people, but today only a few hundred visit the site each year, and there's one very good reason for that. People report hearing screams at night, screams from the dead. Is this true? Are there really ghost fires burning in this ancient ruin? Or is there another explanation? In this video, we'll examine the haunting screams reported by those who dare explore the ruins after dark. We'll uncover the truth behind the ghost fires and what exactly they are. And we'll also learn about an amazing discovery made in 2023. Let's get started. The story of Herculaneum is a sad one. It was a popular Roman vacation destination. But then, in 79 AD, Mount Vesuvius erupted, destroying the entire city. The eruption also destroyed the nearby city of Pompeii, but Herculaneum was totally encased in ash. This meant that, unlike Pompeii, almost nothing was immediately lost to erosion. Instead, it sat buried for centuries until the Middle Ages when people began digging through the hardened ash and pumice. They would take valuable objects out of the ground and sell them to tourists passing through. What they didn't do was excavate the entire site. It wasn't until 1738 that a proper excavation began, and it's still ongoing to this day. What makes Herculaneum so unique is that while Pompeii was mostly destroyed by hot ash, pumice, and rock, Herculaneum was mostly destroyed by fire. The heat was so intense that it actually melted bronze statues and turned them to liquid. It also burned and consumed the bodies of thousands of citizens. These ghostly remains are what many believe to be the source of the hauntings. According to reports from archaeologists, some bones found in Herculaneum were completely hollowed out, suggesting that the body inside had been burned away entirely. You may have seen videos or heard stories about skulls being found with faces completely burnt away, leaving just the jawbone intact. That's what happened here. The air temperature reached 2,500 degrees Celsius. In fact, the heat was so extreme that even gold items weren't spared. Gold coins had their edges melted and fused together. What makes this place so scary is that along with these remains, visitors also hear terrifying screams. Some claim that if you listen carefully at night, you can hear the souls of Herculaneum screaming in agony. The first reports came in 1750 when excavations were underway and people started reporting hearing the sounds of screams, cries, and moans coming from underground. Since then, stories have come and gone, But recently, more and more people have begun sharing their experiences. It's important to note that the official site itself closes at sunset, so anyone who hears the screams is either trespassing or has stumbled into the wrong place. Some skeptics claim that the location isn't accurate and that it's not in Herculaneum at all, but somewhere else. However, dozens of explorers have shared footage claiming to have visited the site and captured audio of the screams. One of the most compelling pieces of evidence comes from an archaeologist named Giulia Iannone. She claims that during her work she could often hear disembodied screams and voices coming from deep within the ash. On some nights, she says, the sounds were so loud that she and her team had to pause their work and let the unearthly cries pass. So, is this evidence enough to convince you that there are ghosts in Herculaneum? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. While there are many skeptics out there are some theories that might explain these strange occurrences. One theory suggests that these screams aren't actually coming from the dead at all, but from pockets of carbon dioxide gas. As the ash and rubble settle over the skeletons, it creates an environment where carbon dioxide builds up. When this happens, the gas seeps through the cracks and crevices of the ruins, making its way to the surface. When the CO2 reaches the outside world, it mingles with oxygen and forms carbonic acid. This acid then reacts with the limestone buildings, causing them to fizz and release small bubbles of gas. Some believe that the sound of these bubbles is what's being perceived as screams. However, this theory doesn't hold up because we know that carbon dioxide makes a hissing noise, not a screaming one. There's also another reason why the screaming sounds aren't caused by gas. If this were true, then we would expect the sounds to be consistent and constant. But this isn't the case. Many explorers have visited Herculaneum and not heard anything at all. Those who do hear the sounds report that they're random and unpredictable, sometimes quiet and sometimes incredibly loud. One of the biggest mysteries surrounding the ghost fires is how the bodies were burned so intensely yet remained trapped beneath the ruins. To understand this, we need to look at the type of fire that occurred. The fire that destroyed Herculaneum was not a normal fire like you might see in a fireplace. Instead, it was an extremely hot and rapid fire. The high temperatures were caused by the burning of magnesium and calcium compounds in the ash and pumice that fell from Mount Vesuvius. These materials ignited and burned fiercely, causing the intense heat that we see today. This is the same reaction that causes forest fires to burn so quickly and with such force. Once the fuel source is depleted, however, the fire goes out. So why didn't the bodies just fall out of the intense heat? As we mentioned earlier, the heat in Herculaneum reached 2,500 degrees Celsius. At this temperature, the human body can be broken down into its basic elements: carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, and oxygen. All of these elements were present in the ash and pumice that covered the city. So when the fire hit the bodies, it broke them down into their basic elements and scattered them in all directions. Some of these elements made their way to the surface and were lost forever. However, others became trapped in the lower layers of ash and pumice. These are the remains that archaeologists have been finding and studying ever since the excavations began. So, what does this mean for the future of Herculaneum? Well, we can probably expect to find more and more remains as the excavations continue. But, as far as the ghost fires go, we don't know what will happen. Some say that the only way to put them out is to burn the bodies completely, which raises ethical questions about disturbing the dead. Others argue that we should just leave them alone and let the ghosts scream in peace. What do you think? Should we try to put out the ghost fires or leave them alone? Now that we've talked about the ghost fires, let's move on to something more positive. In 2023, an incredible discovery was made in Herculaneum. Archaeologists uncovered a mural depicting scenes from Greek mythology. The discovery was made during excavations at a house near the city's harbor. The mural is thought to date back to the 1st century AD, just decades before the eruption of Mount Vesuvius. It measures 4 by 2 meters and depicts scenes from the myth of Andromeda. Andromeda was the daughter of King Cepheus and Queen Cassiopeia. One day, Poseidon became angry with the queen because she boasted that her daughter was more beautiful than him. As punishment, he sent a sea monster to destroy the kingdom. Andromeda was chained to a rock by her father as a sacrifice, but she was saved by the hero Perseus. This mural is important because it shows us how the Romans viewed Greek mythology. The Romans were fascinated by Greek culture and mythology, and they often copied Greek artwork and stories. This mural is a rare example of Roman art that shows a scene from Greek mythology. It's also important because it gives us clues about the people who lived in Herculaneum. The mural was found in a wealthy house near the harbor, so it was probably made for a wealthy Roman citizen. It's possible that the owner of the house commissioned the mural as a symbol of his wealth and power. We hope that you enjoyed learning about the ghost fires of Herculaneum. We know that this is a controversial topic, but we wanted to share the different perspectives with you. Let us know what you think about the ghost fires in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more videos like this one. Thanks for watching. Hi, it's me, number 6, the Blood Pit of Ur. In this series, we bring you the most mysterious archaeological finds from around the world. Join us as we explore the secrets of the past and uncover the mysteries that continue to baffle scientists and historians alike. From ancient artifacts to lost cities, each discovery is a step closer to understanding our place in the universe. But be warned, some of these mysteries may never be solved. So, are you brave enough to join us on this journey? If so, then stay tuned and let's dive into the unknown together. Now let's get into today's video. The Blood Pit of Ur. The royal tombs of Ur were discovered by British archaeologist Sir Leonard Woolley in 1927. He found them at the ancient Mesopotamian city of Ur, which was located in what is now southern Iraq. The site had already been identified in the early 20th century, and excavations began in 1919. However, Woolley's team didn't come across any significant remains until 3 years later when they uncovered the astonishing treasures hidden beneath the desert sands. Ur was a major city during the time of the biblical patriarch Abraham, hence its significance in the history of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. It served as the capital of the Sumerian Empire between 2100 and 2000 BC. According to the Bible, Abraham was born in Ur before migrating to Haran, where he eventually settled in Canaan. Today, visitors can explore the ruins of Ur and other ancient sites like Eridu, Uruk, Lagash, and others thanks to the UNESCO World Heritage Center. One of the most fascinating discoveries made during the excavation of the royal tombs of Ur was the presence of thousands-of-year-old fingerprints impressed into the clay that lined the tombs. These fingerprints were left behind by the hands of the builders who constructed the tombs. Some even belonged to women, suggesting that they played a part in the construction process, which was unusual at the time. This discovery provided valuable insights into the labor practices and social norms of the ancient Sumerian civilization. However, there have been more recent findings that have challenged conventional historical narratives about Ur. For example, archaeologists have discovered evidence that suggests the city was not abandoned as previously thought, but rather experienced a significant decline in population due to environmental changes. One study published in 2021 reported that the roots of date palms found near Ur contained pollen grains that indicated the presence of a freshwater marsh in the area around 2000 BCE. This finding challenges the traditional belief that the city was deserted after the end of the Bronze Age, as it suggests that people continued to live there during the Iron Age. Another recent discovery that has shed light on life in Ur is the excavation of a large building complex known as the Great House. Archaeologists believe this structure may have served as the palace of the Sumerian kings or an administrative center for the city. The complex features numerous rooms, courtyards, and a central courtyard surrounded by high walls. Researchers have also uncovered various artifacts within the complex, including tablets bearing royal seals and cylinder seals depicting mythical creatures such as dragons and griffins. These finds provide valuable clues about the political and cultural landscape of ancient Ur. Despite these recent discoveries, one of the most enduring mysteries surrounding Ur is the enigmatic blood pit. This enigmatic structure was discovered by archaeologist John Joseph in 1934, over 7 years after the initial excavations led by Sir Leonard Woolley. Located deep within the Royal Cemetery, the blood pit was found underneath a series of stone hinges that mark the entrance to a tomb. At first glance, it may appear as just another ordinary pit, but its true significance soon became apparent as archaeologists uncovered layer upon layer of human remains. The pit was filled to the brim with hundreds of skeletons, many of which were found lying face down in fetal positions. Some of the skeletons showed signs of violent trauma, such as skull fractures and pierced spines, suggesting they may have been victims of torture or executed before being thrown into the pit. What makes the blood pit even more eerie is the presence of red clay throughout the site. The clay is believed to have been used as a sealant to preserve the bodies and prevent them from decomposing. This practice was common in ancient Mesopotamia, but the sheer amount of red clay found in the pit suggests a ritualistic element to the burials. Adding to the mystery, archaeologists also found animal bones and teeth in the pit, indicating that some sort of sacrifice may have taken place. Despite numerous attempts to decipher the purpose of the blood pit, no conclusive evidence has surfaced. Some scholars speculate that it served as a mass burial ground for victims of war or plague, while others believe it was used to sacrifice prisoners during religious ceremonies. However, these theories are largely speculative, and the true meaning of the blood pit remains elusive. There are different theories regarding the true nature of the blood pit. One popular theory is that it was used as a sacrificial pit where humans and animals were thrown into it during religious rituals. This theory is supported by the presence of animal bones and teeth found in the pit. Another theory is that it was a punishment pit where criminals or those who broke the law were thrown and left to die. This theory is based on the fact that some skeletons show signs of trauma and may have been victims of torture. A third theory is that it was a mass burial pit used to dispose of bodies during times of war or plague. This theory is less popular as there is no evidence of a war or plague during the time Ur was inhabited. However, there is another theory that stands out among all the others. Some experts believe that this gruesome pit was actually used for feeding the hungry, not burying the dead. In ancient times, it wasn't uncommon for the elite members of society to feed the poor and the hungry. But this practice took a sinister turn with the rise of slavery and human sacrifice. Instead of giving food to the poor, the rich and powerful would throw food into pits or other open areas and then force slaves or prisoners to fight over the scraps. This gruesome practice was seen as a form of entertainment for the upper classes, who would watch as the desperate individuals fought tooth and nail to get their hands on some sustenance. Now, imagine if someone captured your arms and legs and then threw you into a pit full of other struggling people. You would probably fight back, wouldn't you? And what if you managed to kill your opponent in the struggle? Well, in that case, you'd likely be thrown out of the pit yourself, labeled a murderer, and sentenced to death. So the blood pit of Ur might have been more of a feeding ground than a burial chamber. But there's still one big question. Why did archaeologists find skeletons in fetal positions? One explanation is that some people voluntarily jumped into the pit to feed themselves because they were starving. After all, staying in a fetal position may have been the only way to protect oneself from others. Those who were too weak to defend themselves were killed by the others and thrown into the pit, along with anyone who tried to save them. And finally, the authorities would clear out the pit and dump the corpses of the victims into it. This may explain why some skeletons were found with their hands raised, as if they were trying to protect their heads. It seems likely that this horrific pit saw its fair share of violence and bloodshed, making it a fitting namesake. Over the years, several theories have attempted to explain its purpose, ranging from a place of sacrifice to a method of disposing of unwanted individuals. But without concrete evidence, the true meaning of the blood pit remains shrouded in mystery. What do you think the bloodbath was used for? Let us know your thoughts. In the comments below, don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button for more videos like this. Thanks for watching. See you next time. The archaeologists never expected to see this. Thousands of tiny urns filled with burned infant bones were uncovered at the site of an ancient Carthaginian temple. Was this some kind of ritual? And what did they want with all of those children? Hi, everyone. Welcome to my channel. Today, we will be traveling back in time to the ancient city of Carthage. As we explore this ruined city, we will discover a dark secret that has been hidden for thousands of years. This discovery has shocked the entire world. But before we begin, be sure to subscribe if you haven't already so that you won't miss any new videos. Now, let's get started. Carthage was an ancient city located in what is today northern Africa. It was founded by the Phoenicians around the year 814 BC. During its heyday, it was a major center of the Mediterranean world, controlling vast amounts of wealth and power. However, the city's prominence did not last forever. In the late 3rd century BC, Rome and Carthage went to war. The Punic Wars resulted in the destruction of Carthage and the enslavement or killing of many of its citizens. Today, all that remains of Carthage are the ruins of its great buildings and the secrets of its past. One of the most fascinating aspects of Carthage's history is its religious beliefs and practices. The Carthaginians were polytheistic, meaning they believed in many gods. They worshipped a pantheon of deities that included some of the same gods as the Greeks and Romans, such as Zeus, Hades, and Apollo. But they also had their own unique gods and goddesses, such as Baal-Hamon, a supreme god associated with fertility and the sky. Archaeologists have uncovered many artifacts related to the Carthaginians' religious beliefs and practices. One of the most interesting finds was a collection of small clay figurines that date back to the 6th century BC. These figurines are thought to represent various gods and goddesses, as well as other supernatural beings. Some of the figurines depict male deities with beards and wearing elaborate headdresses, while others show female deities with exaggerated breasts and hips. Many of the figurines have been found in areas associated with fertility cults, leading scholars to believe that they may have been used in rituals related to fertility and procreation. Other figurines are thought to represent more abstract concepts such as the sun and the moon. For example, one figurine found near the Temple of Tanit depicts a woman holding a crescent moon over her head. In addition to figurines, archaeologists have also uncovered a variety of other artifacts that provide insight into the religious beliefs and practices of the Carthaginians. These include bronze and stone statues, as well as a wide range of everyday objects such as lamps, mirrors, and jewelry. Some of these items bear symbols or images of specific deities, while others have inscriptions in the Carthaginian language. Together, these artifacts provide a rich and complex picture of the religious life of the Carthaginians. They show a people who were deeply concerned with fertility, the cycle of life and death, and the mysteries of the natural world. As we continue to explore the ruins of Carthage, we can't help but be amazed by the ingenuity and creativity of its people. Their religious beliefs were complex and multifaceted, and they expressed themselves through a variety of art forms. Who knows what other secrets the ruins of Carthage are hiding? Maybe there are even more artifacts just waiting to be discovered that will shed new light on this fascinating civilization. The top layer of the earth in the area where the excavations were taking place was carefully removed by the archaeologists. After weeks of careful work, they finally reached the layer beneath it. To their surprise, it was littered with thousands of tiny urns. Each urn was no bigger than a child's fist and was filled with cremated human remains. What made this discovery even more shocking was the fact that the remains were not those of adults, but of infants. After examining the artifacts found at the site, archaeologists determined that the infants were only a few months old when they died. Some of them hadn't even reached the age of 1 month. What could have motivated the Carthaginians to sacrifice so many infants? There had never been anything like this before. To understand what might have motivated the Carthaginians to engage in such horrific practices, it's important to consider the historical context of their civilization. The Carthaginians were an ancient people who lived in North Africa, and their culture was heavily influenced by the beliefs and customs of the Phoenicians, a seafaring people from the Middle East. The Phoenicians were known for their exploration and trade, and they established colonies throughout the Mediterranean, including Carthage. One of the key features of Phoenician culture was the importance placed on fertility and the worship of various gods and goddesses associated with fertility, such as Baal-Hamon. The Phoenicians believed that these deities had the power to control the fertility of both humans and animals, and they engaged in rituals and sacrifices to ensure the health and prosperity of their crops and livestock. Similarly, the Carthaginians inherited these beliefs and practices and incorporated them into their own religion. They built temples dedicated to deities like Baal-Hamon and Tophet, and they held festivals and ceremonies in their honor. However, the nature of these rituals and sacrifices is what makes them so disturbing. According to historical accounts and archaeological evidence, the Carthaginians practiced human sacrifice as a way to appease their gods and ensure their continued favor. While the specific details of these sacrifices vary, it's clear that they were willing to make great sacrifices, including the lives of their children, to satisfy their religious obligations. The discovery of the mass infant sacrifice at Tophet provides a disturbing glimpse into the extent of Carthaginian devotion and desperation. The sheer number of infants sacrificed suggests that this was a widespread and accepted practice, and the location of the site near a temple further reinforces the connection to religious ritual. It's possible that the Carthaginians believed that sacrificing their children would bring about bountiful harvests, successful military campaigns, or the protection of their city from harm. Or perhaps they saw it as an opportunity to ensure the safe delivery of their mothers during childbirth, a dangerous process in the ancient world. Whatever the motivation, the practice of sacrificing infants was a dark and disturbing aspect of Carthaginian culture, and it's a reminder of the lengths to which people will go in the name of religion. What's even more incredible is that this wasn't an isolated incident. Similar discoveries have been made in other parts of the ancient world, suggesting that the practice of sacrificing infants was more widespread than previously thought. For example, in the ancient Greek city of Delphi, archaeologists have found evidence of infant sacrifice dating back to the 7th century BC. Similarly, in the Roman city of Praeneste, they uncovered a bronze figurine depicting a woman holding a small child over a fire. These discoveries, along with the Tophet find, paint a grim picture of the practices that were commonplace in the ancient world. It's important to remember that these were not just rituals performed by a small group of zealots. Rather, they were accepted and even encouraged by the leaders of society. The elite class of Carthage actively promoted the worship of deities like Baal-Hamon, and they participated in the sacrifices and rituals themselves. This suggests that the practice of sacrificing infants was deeply ingrained in the culture of Carthage and that it was seen as a necessary part of maintaining the city, its prosperity, and well-being. The practice of sacrificing infants was a dark and disturbing aspect of Carthaginian culture, and it's a reminder of the lengths to which people will go in the name of religion. However, it's also an important part of understanding the history of the ancient world and the beliefs and practices of civilizations that came before us. By studying these cultures, we can learn about the different ways that people have lived and the challenges they have faced throughout history. And while some of these practices may seem barbaric to us today, it's important to remember that they were part of a larger cultural context, and that they should be understood in that context. That being said, the practice of sacrificing infants is something that should be condemned and never repeated. It's a tragic loss of innocent life, and it's a dark chapter in human history. If you liked this video, then check out these other videos about mysterious ancient cities. Which one will you choose? Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss any new videos. We'll see you next time. A mysterious crater in the Middle East. It's no secret that our planet Earth is full of wonders. From the highest mountains to the deepest oceans, there are many places around the world that have been the source of fascination for humans for thousands of years. But there are also many strange and mysterious places on Earth that even modern science cannot explain. In today's video, we will be talking about one such place, a mysterious crater located in the Middle East that has been the source of much speculation and mystery for centuries. It is known as the Eye of Sodom, and according to legend, anyone who looks into it will see visions of fire and brimstone. Is this just a myth, or is there something more to this mysterious crater? We will explore all these questions and more in today's video, so make sure to watch till the end. The Eye of the Desert. The Eye of the Desert, also known as the Eye of Fire, is a geological formation located in the Middle East. It is situated near the Dead Sea between Jordan and Israel and is believed to be over 300 million years old. The Eye of the Desert is a salt-crusted pool of water that is perfectly round and looks like a giant eye peering out from the desert sands. Its diameter is approximately 300 feet, with its surface covered in a thin layer of salt and other minerals. The water in the pool is said to be extremely salty and is rumored to have healing properties. According to local legend, anyone who takes a dip in the pool will be cured of any illness or ailment. However, the true story behind this mysterious pool is much more scientific. The Eye of the Desert was formed millions of years ago when the Dead Sea was at a much higher level than it is today. As the sea level dropped, it left behind a series of pools, and one of these pools eventually became the Eye of the Desert. Over time, the pool filled with salt water and other minerals, creating the perfect condition for a unique type of algae to grow. This algae gives the pool its striking green color and is also responsible for the pool as healing properties. The Eye of the Desert is a popular tourist destination, and many people visit it each year to take a dip in its waters and experience its alleged healing powers. The Legend of Sodom and Gomorrah. The Eye of Sodom is steeped in legend and lore and is said to be the only physical remnant of the destruction of the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, which were destroyed by God due to their wickedness. According to the Bible, Sodom and Gomorrah were two cities located in the Dead Sea region. They were known for their wealth and luxury, but also for their sin and corruption. When God decided to destroy the cities, He sent a terrible plague upon them, killing everyone in sight. The cities were then buried in ash, and the entire region was transformed into a wasteland. The Eye of Sodom is said to be the only thing that remains of the cities today. It is a large pool of water filled with sulfur and other minerals, which is thought to be the remnants of the plague that killed the inhabitants of the city. According to legend, anyone who looks into the pool will see visions of the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. Some say they see the burning cities and the people fleeing in terror. Others say they see the sulfur rain and the entire region turned into a wasteland. Of course, there is no scientific evidence to support this legend, but it is still a popular story among the locals and tourists alike. The Pool of Silence. The Eye of Sodom is also known as the Pool of Silence because it is said to be so peaceful and serene that no sound can be heard. Visitors report feeling an overwhelming sense of calm and tranquility when they stand next to the pool. It is said that the silence is so profound that it can be heard and that it is a truly humbling experience. The silence is said to be so complete that even the wind seems to stop blowing, and all that can be heard is the beating of one's own heart. Some believe that the silence is caused by the high concentration of sulfur in the pool, which is said to have a numbing effect on the body. Others believe that it is simply a trick of the mind, that the peace and quiet of the desert surrounding the pool creates an atmosphere of tranquility that allows one to focus on the silence. Whatever the cause, the silence of the pool is truly remarkable and is a major draw for visitors. The mystery remains. Despite all the theories and speculations, The truth behind the Eye of Sodom remains a mystery. What is certain is that it is a beautiful and mysterious place that has captured the imagination of people for centuries. Whether you believe in the legends and myths surrounding the pool or not, there is no denying that it is a truly remarkable natural wonder. For centuries, people have been drawn to the eye of the desert. Some come to take a dip in its waters and experience its alleged healing properties. Others come to pay homage to the legendary cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. And still, others simply come to marvel at the beauty and mystery of this unique natural formation. The Eye of the Desert is a place that has something for everyone. As we continue to explore and learn more about our planet, we may one day uncover the secrets of the Eye of the Desert. But until then, it will continue to be a place of mystery and wonder for all who visit. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe for more amazing content. If you have ever visited the Eye of Sodom, we would love to hear about your experience in the comments below. Don't forget to join us next time for more exciting discoveries. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Now, let's move on to the next video. Lake Natron, a deadly trap for birds. Imagine a beautiful bright blue lake surrounded by lush vegetation and teeming with life. It sounds like a paradise for birds, doesn't it? Well, that's exactly what Lake Natron in Tanzania looks like, except for one small detail. The lake is full of dead birds, literally. Thousands upon thousands of birds, their bodies turned to stone, stuck in the sticky tar of the lake. It's a grim sight that has earned Lake Natron the nickname of the Bird Cemetery. But why are all these birds dying? And what makes Lake Natron such a deadly trap? To understand what's going on here, we need to look at the chemistry of the lake. Lake Natron is a soda lake, meaning that it has a very high pH level, similar to baking soda. In fact, Lake Natron is so alkaline that it can reach a pH level of up to 10.5. For comparison, the pH level of seawater is around 8.5. This high pH level makes the lake extremely caustic, and any living thing that comes into contact with it is quickly burned and killed. But that's not the only thing that makes Lake Natron so dangerous. The lake is also full of a high concentration of salts and minerals, including calcium carbonate, which is found in limestone. When these minerals reach a critical concentration in the water, they begin to precipitate out, forming a thick, sticky substance that can trap birds in mid-flight. The birds become stuck in the tar and are unable to free themselves, eventually dying and becoming part of the bird cemetery. So how do the birds die? Well, when a bird is trapped in the tar, it struggles to free itself. This struggle causes it to inhale large amounts of the caustic water, which burns its lungs and makes it difficult to breathe. Eventually, the bird suffocates and dies. The body then dries and shrinks, leaving behind a hollow shell that is eventually filled with sediment and becomes part of the rock. But why are the shells of the birds turned to stone? Well, as the shells of the birds dry in the sun, they undergo a process called mummification. The heat of the sun evaporates the water from the shells, leaving behind a dry, leathery material. Over time, this material hardens and becomes stone-like. The result is a perfectly preserved bird skeleton that looks like it's made of stone. The lake is home to a variety of bird species, including flamingos, herons, egrets, and ducks. The birds are attracted to the lake because of its abundance of food. The water is full of algae and other aquatic plants that serve as food for the birds. Unfortunately, many of these birds end up becoming trapped in the tar and added to the bird cemetery. The first European to discover Lake Natron was the German explorer Johann Ludwig Krapf in 1848. He named the lake after the Arabic word for soda, natron. Soda was used by the ancient Egyptians to preserve mummies. The lake is located in the Gregory Rift Valley in northern Tanzania. The valley is a major tectonic plate boundary and is home to a number of active volcanoes. The most active volcano in the area is Mount Kilimanjaro, which is also the highest mountain in Africa. Today, Lake Natron is a popular tourist destination. Visitors come from all over the world to see the bizarre sight of thousands of stone birds. The lake is also home to a number of other animals, including hippos, crocodiles, and a variety of fish species. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe for more amazing content. If you have ever visited Lake Natron, we would love to hear about your experience in the comments below. Don't forget to join us next time for more exciting discoveries. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. The desert sands of Egypt have yielded many secrets over the centuries, but few are as disturbing as the pits containing thousands of severed hands found at the archaeological site of Avaris. But what's the story behind these unsettling discoveries, and what do they reveal about the people who owned them? This is Unveiled, and today we're answering the extraordinary question, why were thousands of hands chopped off in ancient Egypt? The Egyptian city of Avaris sits 200 miles northeast of Cairo near the modern town of Tel El Marna. It was here in the latter half of the 2nd millennium BC that one of Egypt's most brutal pharaohs left his mark on the world. And it was also here where archaeologists uncovered a shocking find in 1983. At the time, an Egyptian archaeologist named Zahi Hawass was part of a team excavating a large Middle Kingdom necropolis. His job was to inspect a particular area on the west side of the massive burial site where previous excavations had turned up 2 small pits dug into the ground. Hawass knew from the start that there was something strange going on here, because throughout the rest of the necropolis, human remains were treated with respect even if they were buried in mass graves. The dead were typically laid out carefully, sometimes placed inside stone coffins or sarcophagi, and always treated with dignity. At the 2 mysterious holes, however, there was no trace of bodies other than a scattering of bones, yet somehow these holes still seemed like graves. As he worked, Hawass uncovered more pits, and with each new discovery, the full scope of the mystery became more apparent. In all, he found 60 holes scattered across the necropolis. They ranged in depth from shallow to deep, and some were wide enough to contain dozens of human remains. What's more, several were constructed using the same brick lining seen in some tombs. As they continued to dig through the soil and sift through the artifacts, the archaeologists were stunned by what they found. Thousands of clay figurines depicting female deities, hundreds of scarabs made of precious materials, and numerous fragments of papyrus offering prayers to various gods were unearthed. But perhaps the strangest and most haunting find was the collection of human remains. All told, the team found 455 severed right hands and 15 complete skeletons, most of whom had been mutilated in similar fashion. There were 139 female hands, 289 male hands, and 25 children's hands. All had been cut off at the wrist with a sharp instrument. Every single one was a right hand. These macabre findings soon attracted the attention of experts from around the world. Hawass worked closely with American Egyptologist Barry J. Kemp, while forensic anthropologist Dr. Charlotte R. Y. Naish joined the investigation in order to determine how the victims died. Based on the condition of the bones, she concluded that they had been cut off while the individuals were still alive, though the exact circumstances surrounding their deaths remained unclear. In 2003, Kemp described the hands as having an almost ritualistic quality to their display, suggesting that this was likely a significant aspect of whatever happened to the people of Avaris. He said, "I'm not saying they were sacrificed, but someone did something to them before cutting off their hands. It may have been an execution or some kind of sacrifice, but we don't know." While the Egyptians were known for their religious rituals and ceremonies, including some involving animal sacrifices, there was nothing in the historical record that indicated such extreme practices. The true nature of these hand offerings remained a mystery until recent discoveries shed new light on the fate of the people of Avaris. A few years after the initial findings, archaeologists uncovered another intriguing clue: a mass grave containing 500 skeletons just south of the hand pits. Many of the bodies bore clear signs of violence, including stab wounds, arrowheads embedded in their bones, and severed fingers. This suggested that these individuals died during a battle or a violent siege. Further analysis revealed that they'd lived during the reign of Pharaoh Seqenenre-Tao, who ruled Egypt between 1550 and 1540 BC. During his reign, Egypt's 14th nome, a region encompassing parts of the Nile Delta, broke away from the new kingdom and established a dynasty of its own. The breakaway ruler was a man named Kamoses, and he immediately went to war with Egypt's legitimate ruler. It's believed that the violent struggle between Kamoses and Seqenenre ultimately resulted in the destruction of Avaris. According to some historians, Seqenenre burned the city to the ground and slaughtered everyone inside. Others claim that Kamoses was victorious, allowing him to rule the 14th nome and establish a dynasty that lasted for nearly a century. What's become clear, thanks to the archaeological evidence, is that these two men were at the center of a violent conflict that devastated Avaris. But exactly what role did they play in the fates of the severed hands and the missing bodies? To understand this and get to the bottom of the case once and for all, we have to look at the individuals themselves. Who were these men, and why does it matter? To begin with, let's focus on the breakaway ruler, Kamoses. Very little is known for certain about him. Like so much of ancient Egyptian history, written records tend to be fragmented or biased. Most of what we know comes from the Turin King List, a document created sometime between 1290 and 1224 BC that lists rulers of Egypt starting from the very first pharaoh, King Minos. On this list, Kamoses' name has been erased, along with those of his sons, Bacon-Ranef and Kamoses II. However, other physical evidence found at sites like Karnak Temple provides us with the names that would have originally been inscribed on the king list. And it's believed that Kamoses I founded his dynasty in opposition to Egypt as a traditional line of succession. In fact, his title may have been that of the second pharaoh. Alternatively, he may have been a high priest or governor of the 14th nome and simply changed his title once the region declared independence. Whatever his origins, Kamoses went on to wage war against Seqenenre-Tao, the legitimate pharaoh of Egypt, and it's possible that the relationship between these two men sheds light on the events that unfolded at Avaris. Historian Alan H. Gardner believed that Kamoses was an impostor of sorts. That is, he wasn't really a descendant of Egypt's royal bloodline, but rather an ambitious leader who sought power by any means necessary. As proof, Gardner cited the discovery of a scarab bearing the name of Kamoses and his wife, along with the date of their coronation. The scarab was found near Abydos, which suggests that Kamoses either staged a coup d'état in the capital or successfully campaigned to take over the city. Either way, he swiftly consolidated his power and began raising armies to hold off Seqenenre's forces. For several years, they fought to a standstill, neither able to gain the upper hand. But eventually, somewhere between 1540 and 1535 BC, the tide turned and Seqenenre-Tao assembled a massive military force to defeat his rival once and for all. Sometime later, the two met in battle, possibly at the city of Avaris. According to some accounts, the carnage was unprecedented with thousands of chariots and infantrymen on each side. Although the details vary, it seems as though Seqenenre-Tao was victorious, dealing a decisive blow to Kamoses' army and reasserting his control over the 14th nome. Whether or not he took the life of Kamoses himself is debatable, but he certainly killed many of Kamoses' followers, including a group of nobles who betrayed him and switched allegiances. Some historians believe these captured nobles were paraded through the streets of Avaris and then executed, with their severed hands being offered as tribute to the gods. Others contend that the executions took place at the nearby city of Thebes and that the hands were then sent to Avaris to be displayed in the pits. To back up this theory, historian W. J. M. F. N. DePau pointed out that the discovery of the mass grave containing 500 bodies near the hand pits further indicates that there was some kind of massacre at Avaris. The similarities between these victims and the people who lived during Kamoses' reign suggest that they too died during the battle between Seqenenre and Kamoses, and that their right hands were taken to be offered as sacrifices. After executing his enemies, Sekenenre-Tao returned to Thebes and celebrated his victory. His wife and successor, Queen Sobekneferu, may have been involved in the ceremonies. Ultimately, the city of Avaris was probably abandoned following the battle, with the residents fleeing, being killed, or taken captive. As for Sekenenre-Tao, he died between 1540 and 1535 BC. Perhaps he fell in battle against Kamos's forces, which would explain the origin of his own severed hand, a piece of evidence that has thus far evaded archaeologists. Whether or not he actually fought against Kamoses and perished in the process is still debated, however, and the truth may never be known. What is clear is that the people of Avaris suffered a violent and untimely demise, and, based on the archaeological evidence, it seems they may have been the victims of a vengeful pharaoh and his queen. So, while we may never know exactly what happened to every single person whose body parts were discovered in those pits, we now have a good idea of what may have led to their gruesome end. Their story is one of bloodshed, treachery, and unimaginable human cruelty. But that's all for now. Thanks for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments section below, and I'll see you next time on Unveiled. There are plenty of mysterious places around our world that have earned themselves a reputation for being cursed. And there's perhaps no better example of this than the Black Ziggurat of Ur. This place is considered to be a doorway to another dimension where evil shadow beings lie in wait. This otherworldly location is actually a real place located in the country of Eswatini, also known as Swaziland. But despite it being very real, not many people know about this cursed ziggurat. So join us as we look at the scary truth behind this cursed ruin. The name ziggurat might sound familiar to you, but if it isn't, don't worry. A ziggurat was an ancient form of temple tower that was mostly found in Mesopotamia. They were most commonly constructed during the time of ancient Babylon, though they could be found all across the region. It was believed that these ziggurats served as a gateway to the heavens, with each level symbolizing one of the tiers of the gods. The largest and grandest of these ziggurats was the Tower of Babel, which reached a height of over 200 feet. But while these structures were usually impressive feats of architecture and engineering, sometimes they had more sinister purposes. In some cases, these towers were used as a way to capture and trap spirits. If that sounds familiar to you, you might be picking up what I'm putting down. That's because the modern concept of a haunted house originated from ancient Mesopotamian beliefs surrounding their ziggurats. The idea was that when these structures were built, the priests would perform rituals on the topmost level to attract the attention of the gods. And if done correctly, the gods would become trapped within the ziggurat forever. The higher up the structure was, the easier it was to trap a god inside, and the more powerful that god was, the more levels were needed to successfully trap it. Sometimes these trapped gods would wreak havoc on those living nearby, resulting in a curse. Because of this, people would often avoid these towers at all costs, and anyone who dared to enter them would do so with great trepidation. Now let's talk about the Black Ziggurat of Ur. To understand what makes this place so terrifying, we need to take a closer look at its history. As I mentioned before, ziggurats were most common in ancient Babylonia. But the Black Ziggurat of Ur was actually located in the neighboring kingdom of Sumer. Unlike other ziggurats, the Black Ziggurat of Ur was made entirely out of black bricks. This was significant because in ancient Mesopotamian culture, black represented death and the underworld. This ziggurat was dedicated to a deity named Namu, who was an entity associated with the afterlife. According to legend, Namu was one of the most powerful deities in the Sumerian pantheon. He was considered to be the lord of the underworld and the god of wisdom and magic. Some texts even refer to him as the father of all wizards. Despite his immense power, Namu was not seen as a benevolent deity. Instead, he was feared by the mortals who lived in his realm. It was believed that Namu enjoyed nothing more than messing with the minds of humans. Some say that he would appear to them in dreams and drive them insane. Others say that he would possess their bodies and force them to do his bidding. Whatever the case may be, it's safe to say that Namu was a truly terrifying god. So it's not surprising that the ziggurat dedicated to him was seen as a cursed place. Over time, the ziggurat became known as the gateway to the underworld. It was believed that those who entered the structure would never come back. Instead, they would be trapped in the netherworld forever. Now, you might be wondering why anyone would ever enter such a cursed place in the first place. Well, some people were willing to risk it all in order to meet with Namu. Those who did were either seeking his power or hoping that he would protect them in their time of need. But more often than not, these people would vanish without a trace. There are countless stories of people who entered the ziggurat and were never seen again. Some say that their souls were trapped within the walls of the structure, while others say that they simply disappeared into thin air. One of the most famous legends surrounding the black ziggurat of Ur tells the story of a man named Gilgamesh. In ancient Mesopotamian culture, Gilgamesh was a legendary hero who embarked on dangerous quests and battled fearsome creatures, but even he was not immune to the power of the black ziggurat. One day, Gilgamesh decided to enter the ziggurat and see what secrets it held. However, he soon realized that he had made a terrible mistake. As he ventured deeper into the structure, he began to hear strange noises. At first, they were faint and distant, but soon they grew louder and more menacing. Then he began to see shadowy figures lurking in the corners of his vision. These beings seemed to be made of darkness itself, and they appeared to be watching him intently. Terrified, Gilgamesh turned and ran, but it was too late. The shadow beings were upon him and he was never seen again. Some say that the spirit of Gilgamesh is still trapped within the ziggurat, forever cursed to wander its halls. Another legend tells the story of a priestess who dared to enter the ziggurat. She was a young woman who had been chosen by her people to sacrifice herself to Namu. It was believed that by offering her life, she would be able to appease the god and prevent him from cursing the land. So, with a heavy heart, the priestess entered the ziggurat and sacrificed herself to Namu. However, this did not stop the curse. In fact, it seemed to make things worse. After the priestess's death, the ziggurat began to glow with a strange black light, and from within its depths they heard the voice of Namu laughing maniacally. It was then that the locals realized that they could never escape the curse of the black ziggurat of Ur. Because of these stories and many others like them, the black ziggurat of Ur became known as one of the most cursed places in the world. Even today, people are terrified to set foot near the structure, let alone enter it. It's said that those who do are never seen again. But what's really going on here? Is there any truth to these legends? Well, it's hard to say for sure. What we do know is that the black ziggurat of Ur was an actual place. It was a real ziggurat that was built in ancient Sumer. But everything else is up for debate. Did it really serve as a gateway to the underworld? Was it really haunted by malevolent shadow beings? There's no way to know for sure, but that hasn't stopped people from trying to find out. There have been many expeditions to the black ziggurat of Ur, but none have ever come back with any definitive answers. The place is so dangerous that no one dares go there. Not even archaeologists or paranormal investigators will set foot in this cursed ruin. That means that we may never know the truth about what happened to those who went missing. We can only speculate based on the few artifacts that have been found and the stories that have been passed down through the years. It's possible that there really is something sinister lurking within the walls of the black ziggurat of Ur. Maybe it's a gateway to another dimension, or maybe it's just a bunch of old bricks. Either way, it's best to stay away. No one knows what kind of danger might be lurking inside. And, with that said, we want to ask you, what do you think is going on at the black ziggurat of Ur? Do you believe that it's cursed, or do you think that it's just a figment of people's imaginations? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and while you're at it, be sure to subscribe for more videos like this one. Thanks for watching. This discovery was never supposed to be found by humans. It's one of the most disturbing mysteries that this world has ever seen. Deep in the mountains of Peru, a disturbing discovery was made. A man had been hired to work on a highway construction project. When he and his team were working, they stumbled upon something that sent chills down their spines. It was unlike anything that they had ever seen before. Dozens of mummies had been found, but these weren't ordinary mummies. The way that they were preserved was truly terrifying. What secrets did these mummies have? What was their purpose? Let's find out. A group of workers were working on a highway when they found something strange. At first, they thought it was just a pile of rocks, but then they noticed that there were human bones inside. Soon, the workers were staring at more than a dozen mummified bodies that had been wrapped in cloth. This was a very remote area, so no one knew about this site. The workers quickly told their boss what they had found, and soon authorities were called to the scene. No one could believe their eyes. The Peruvian government immediately stepped in to investigate. An official statement read, "On February 24, 2022, an intervention was carried out in the district of Goiz in the region of Junín. During the archaeological intervention, the presence of 26 bundles was detected. Inside these bundles, there were remains that were mummified, and some of them were found with masks on their heads." It really seemed like something from a horror movie. At this point, everyone wanted answers. Who were these people, and why were they found in such a strange place? The Peruvian government asked for help from two experts in the field, archaeologist Walter Albinares and anthropologist Peter Meher. They worked with the government officials to try to figure out what happened here. They wanted to know who these people were and why they had been sacrificed. After examining the site, the archaeologists were able to determine that this wasn't just a random village or burial ground. This was actually an ancient ceremonial center. It had been used by the Inca people who lived in South America around 1,500 years ago. Back in the day, the Inca people worshipped many different gods, and they would do pretty much anything to please them. That included human sacrifice. Archaeologists think that these people were brought to the ceremonial center and then sacrificed to the gods. After they were killed, their bodies were carefully preserved using special techniques. Even their faces were wrapped up to preserve them, which is why they were found wearing masks. But why were the faces covered? How were the faces covered in the first place? It turns out that their eyes were removed to preserve the bodies. Then the sockets were filled with materials like clay, cotton, cloth, and resin. Afterwards, their mouths were covered, so they would not make a scary or disturbing face when they were found. But unfortunately, even though their eyes were gone, their faces still looked very scary. As the Daily Mail reported, the mummies are believed to have been deliberately hidden 300 years ago after Spanish conquistadors arrived in the area, and the Inca people feared reprisals if their religious practices were discovered. This means that these mummies may have been buried a long time ago and then forgotten about until recently. The Spanish conquistadors were ruthless. They killed anyone who didn't follow the Catholic religion, so the Inca people had to hide their mummies in a secret location. But somehow the site was lost over the years. Some of the mummies were also found wearing jewelry made of gold, copper, and silver. This shows that these people were important members of society. Maybe they were priests or leaders. But that's just a guess. We don't really know much about these mummies because they were never supposed to be found. But how exactly did they die? And what kind of rituals took place here? Well, back in the day, the Inca people practiced a type of bloodletting ritual. This involved making small cuts on the body to let out some blood. It was believed that this would please the gods. However, things got crazier, as we will see. Researchers say that some of the victims were only children when they were killed. One of the children who was found was only 6 years old. He was one of the youngest sacrificial victims in history. The main goal of the bloodletting ritual was to take the blood of the victim and offer it to the gods. This is probably why the bodies were found wrapped in cloth. The blood was probably collected and then sprinkled over statues of the gods. It was a way of showing devotion and respect to the gods. But if the Spanish came across this, they would have executed the entire village. So this is why the bodies were covered and hidden. But these mummies are even scarier than you might think. Even though they're thousands of years old, their faces still look very scary. Just take a look at these photos. Their facial expressions are so realistic. It looks like they were tortured and in great pain when they died. But that's not all. Some of the mummies had their hands raised like they were trying to reach out for help. Imagine stumbling upon these mummies in the middle of the night. You would freak out for sure. It's crazy to think that these mummies were made to look so real. The person who made these must have been an expert in his field. To this day, no one knows who made these masks or why. There are many theories, but without evidence, no one can say for sure. But there's something else that's very strange about these mummies. Their clothes are extremely well preserved. The clothes still look brand new, even though they're thousands of years old. It's amazing to think that the clothes are still in this good of a shape. Maybe this is because they were made with special materials that last a long time. Or maybe it has something to do with how they were treated after they died. Whatever the case, it's definitely something worth mentioning. We should also mention that these mummies were found in a very interesting place. The village where they were found is located high in the Andes Mountains. No one lives there anymore. But back in the day, it was an important religious center. The Inca people traveled from all over the empire to come here and worship their gods. Now, the town where the mummies were found is called Cajamarquilla. It was built on top of the ruins of the ancient ceremonial center. But now that we know more about these mummies, it's time for us to learn about the Inca people. Who were these people and why are they famous? Well, the Inca Empire was one of the largest empires in the world. It stretched along the western side of South America. At its peak, the Inca Empire ruled over 13 million people. It's crazy to think that all of these people followed the same religion and customs. The Inca people reached their peak between 1400 and 1535 AD. Their capital city was Cusco. It's still there today, but it's been heavily damaged by earthquakes and floods. Speaking of their capital city, did you know that the Inca people built the 13th century stone city of Pisac near Cusco? The site is still there and it's a popular tourist destination. It's full of temples and buildings that were made with huge stones. These stones are so big that it's hard to believe that the Inca people were able to move them. The Inca people were known for their amazing stonework. They built some of the most impressive structures in the world. They constructed buildings that were many stories tall, but they never used mortar or cement. Instead, they used large stones that fit together perfectly. The Inca people were also very advanced when it came to farming. They built terraces on the sides of mountains. This allowed them to grow crops in a variety of different environments. They even built systems to bring water to their crops. Unfortunately, the Inca people are mostly remembered for their bloodletting rituals. They may have been a peaceful and advanced civilization, but they were very superstitious. And this led to the deaths of thousands of innocent people. Now, we want to ask you, what did you think about these mummies? Did you find them scary or fascinating? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks for watching. He is the Oracle of the Severed Head, and he has a lot to say. He may have been a priest, though it's hard to tell when the lines between priest, prophet, and despot were so blurred in those days. What we do know is that he was important, the severed head of someone important. And he was giving prophecies about who was going to be the next king of the Celts' overlord, Rome. But how could this be possible? Was he speaking to the dead, or letting the dead speak? Let's find out. Now let me take you back to 80 BC. If you ever visited the French city of Rennes, you would have noticed that there are two things that stand out about it. Its fine selection of bakeries and the fact that it's home to one of Europe's largest archaeological sites. In fact, the ruins of this place are so large that you can still see them today. This place was once a sacred Celtic site known as the Sanctuaries of the Severed Head. It's not like archaeologists found a single severed head and decided to build a whole complex around it. Instead, there were hundreds of human skulls stored here, all carefully cleaned and preserved with only their teeth and jawbones removed. These skulls belonged to men, women, and children from as far away as northern Africa and southern England. Some had been decapitated just weeks before they were discovered, while others had clearly been dead for many years. When the Romans took over this area in 50 BC, they built a temple on top of the skull sanctuary. And in the middle of that temple they placed an altar dedicated to some unknown god. They knew they had stumbled onto something big because after the Roman Emperor Augustus outlawed human sacrifice in 7 BC, people kept sneaking into this temple to make offerings to the severed head. So in 4 AD, Augustus's successor, Tiberius, tried to stop people from visiting the site by stationing a military cohort right outside the temple. The problem was the head kept talking. Even though no one knows exactly where the heads came from, it seems like they were brought here intentionally. Many of the wounds on the skulls were consistent with ritualistic behavior rather than warfare. Archaeologists also uncovered an array of objects used in ceremonies nearby, including ceremonial daggers, cauldrons, and tongs used to grab red-hot coals. That means the heads weren't just being stored here. People were bringing them here to burn stuff. You know, if you wanted to impress the person whose head you chopped off, you'd probably want to throw a real good funeral for them. But taking the head along with you might suggest something else, a way to keep their spirit close by or even use it. This wasn't the first time the Celts had done something like this. A century earlier, Julius Caesar mentioned something similar in his book, The Gallic Wars. He said that the Helvetii Druids used to keep the skulls of holy men wrapped up in linen cloths until they started to rot. Then they'd scrape the outside of the cloth off by rubbing it with a stone and then wrap them again in fresh linen. They kept doing this until the skull was completely encased in a sort of mummy-like shell. But why? Well, Caesar had a theory. He thought they did this to preserve the spirits of these holy men so they could use them to gain power. Whatever the reason, they seemed to believe that the longer they kept these skulls wrapped up, the more powerful they became. But what does any of this have to do with oracles? Oracles were supposed to be mediums, people who could communicate with the divine and deliver messages from the gods about everything from the weather to your love life. Most famous examples come from Greece, like the Oracle of Delphi, who was considered the greatest of all the oracles because she delivered cryptic prophecies while in a trance-like state induced by inhaling poisonous gases from a cave near her temple. Now, Greek oracles were usually women, but other cultures had male oracles too, and none of them needed poisonous gas to go into a trance. They just needed a head. The severed head oracle appears in multiple places throughout history. The earliest example comes from the Hebrew Bible, specifically 1 Kings chapter 22, verses 23 to 24, where an unnamed man is described as a seer who speaks through the skulls of the sons of Shema. The passage says he lived in a cave with his sons and made money by pretending to be a prophet. The boys would line up on the roof of their house and he would tell travelers, "Ask me a question, and I will tell you the answer." Then one of his sons would pretend to be a spirit inside the man's mouth, and he would pass on the traveler his question. But it wasn't always a fun game. Sometimes he used his son's skulls to prophesy doom over entire nations. He told King Ahab of Israel that his people would die in battle the next day, which they did. Even though the story isn't very savory, it's pretty clear that this man wasn't actually speaking to his dead sons. He was only mimicking a voice coming from within him. That might have been the case in the Celtic oracle's den, too. Of course, we can't know for sure because almost everything we know about these oracles comes from the Romans, who either destroyed or stole most of the artifacts from their temples. But we do know that these oracles were popular in the region. Pliny the Younger wrote about one such oracle who lived in Vienna. According to Pliny, the man had a human head that he would prophesy with, and he got so popular that eventually people would travel for weeks to see him. The locals started getting annoyed at all the visitors, especially since this guy charged admission to his temple. So they switched their allegiance to another seer named Secundio. Not only did he charge less money, but he didn't need a head to tell fortunes. All he needed was a dream. Pliny says that Secundio would meet with people at night and listen to their dreams while holding their hands. So what did these oracles actually do? While we can't say for sure, it seems likely they pretended to be possessed by the spirits of the dead. This idea of possession isn't just something that happened in ancient Celtic culture. It's common in many religions and belief systems. For example, some believe that shamans were able to enter the bodies of the possessed and expel evil spirits. There's also a bit of evidence that ancient Egyptians believed their kings could be possessed by the god Ra, which made them divine. Meanwhile, Greek mythology is full of stories about people who were possessed by minor deities. The difference between Celtic seers and Greek oracles is that the Celts didn't worship the people they were supposedly possessed by. In fact, some of the skulls at Wren might have belonged to victims of human sacrifice. One legend from this area tells the story of a king named Denval, who ruled sometime around 500 BC. According to the legend, the king held a huge feast, invited every noble in the land, and sacrificed a human in front of them. He dipped bread in the victim's blood and gave it to each guest as a souvenir. At least that's one version of the legend. Another version says that he chained everyone up and then unleashed venomous snakes into the audience stands. Either way, the king was eventually killed, decapitated, and buried in the ground. After that, people started seeing his ghost wandering the battlefield, and eventually that place became a sacred site. Whether or not Denval really existed, it seems likely that the Celts were interested in keeping the memories of their leaders alive long after they died. The Romans recognized this when they incorporated the severed head cult into their religion. In addition to honoring the unknown god at the Temple of the Severed Head, they also honored the severed heads of certain Roman emperors. For example, the Emperor Caligula was succeeded by his great-uncle, Claudius. But after Claudius was assassinated, Caligula's son came to power. When this happened, temples across the empire started honoring Caligula as a god, and severed heads began showing up in places like Egypt, Greece, and Britain. If the Romans were willing to deify anyone who lost their head in a fight, maybe some Celts ended up in the mouths of oracles too. Maybe they spoke to the dead, or maybe they just let the dead speak. However it happened, they had something the Romans wanted: a connection to the supernatural. And in a world without psychiatrists, priests were the original snake oil salesmen. They sold false cures and false prophecies to desperate people who just wanted to hear what they wanted to hear. And sometimes those prophecies were surprisingly accurate, whether the seer saw the future or just guessed it. The truth didn't matter as long as people kept paying them to play the role of God. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe so we can bring you more severed heads. And if you want to learn more about what happened to the Celts after the Romans invaded, check out our series, The Fall of Civilizations.